Jesus' miracles transcended mere spectacle. Their true purpose was to unveil profound truths that humanity, in its current state, was perhaps unprepared to confront. Their enduring power wasn't rooted in their apparent impossibility, but in the deeper revelations they offered. Consider the miracle where Jesus intentionally delayed his arrival by 4 days, a strategic pause that became the very crux of its significance. Or the paradox of a man who gained physical sight, only to lose every other familiar comfort. Then there's the challenging instance where established religious leaders were forced to choose between an undeniable truth and the deeply entrenched systems that guaranteed their control. And finally, a pivotal moment when Jesus performed no overt miracle at all, but simply drew back a veil, allowing 3 select men to perceive a reality that had always existed. These 10 pivotal moments don't merely showcase Jesus' capabilities. They profoundly illuminate his identity, his unwavering authority, his boundless compassion, and his profound willingness to allow people the freedom to reject him rather than compelling belief. Far from universally convincing, these miracles served as profound revelations, exposing the true intentions and beliefs of all who witnessed them. To truly grasp these narratives, it's essential to first comprehend the intrinsic nature of miracles within Jesus' ministry. They were not theatrical displays designed for entertainment, nor were they presented to sway the minds of those already set against belief. In the Gospel of John, these extraordinary acts are deliberately termed signs. A sign, by its very definition, does not exist for its own intrinsic value. Rather, it unequivocally points to a more profound, underlying reality it reveals. And what Jesus' miracles consistently unveiled was an authority so utterly unprecedented that it defied every pre-established category within the religious framework of the era. Intriguingly, while some of these signs attracted vast multitudes, others drastically dispersed them. Some propelled Jesus to widespread fame, yet others transformed him into a hunted man. Consider, for example, the resurrection of Lazarus. This astonishing act did not merely elicit wonder from those present. It directly ignited a dangerous conspiracy to assassinate Jesus. The religious leaders, convening in urgent council, stated with chilling clarity, "This man must die, or everyone will believe in him." This stark tension is paramount to our understanding. Miracles were never neutral. They invariably compelled individuals to make profound decisions, revealing the deepest desires of their hearts. More often than we acknowledge, what people truly sought was not truth itself, but rather comfort, unwavering control, or simply the confirmation of their existing beliefs. When Jesus healed a paralyzed man, the crowds were utterly captivated. Yet, significantly, before he restored the man's physical body, he first pronounced the forgiveness of his sins. It was this act, far more than the physical restoration, that deeply infuriated the scribes. The healing itself was undeniably spectacular, but the declaration of forgiveness was perceived as an outrageous offense, for it boldly claimed an authority that they believed belonged solely to God. Similarly, when Jesus granted sight to a man born blind, instead of embracing a moment of joyous celebration, the Pharisees subjected the man to relentless interrogation, ultimately excommunicating him, and preposterously accused Jesus himself of being a sinner. The miracle did not alter their preconceived notions. Rather, it gravely imperiled their carefully guarded positions of power. Then there was the extraordinary instance where Jesus cast out a legion of demons from a man who had endured years of torment and isolation, dwelling among the tombs. The man was profoundly restored, clothed, in his right mind, and whole. Yet, in a stark display of fear and discomfort with this disruptive power, the very townspeople whose lives had been indirectly impacted by the demoniac's suffering astonishingly implored Jesus to depart from their region. Therefore, as we delve into these profound moments, we are not merely observing events, but witnessing pure revelation. Each miracle serves as a direct answer to fundamental questions. Who wields ultimate authority over death? who possesses the divine right to forgive sins, who truly commands the formidable forces of wind and sea, and who discerns the quiet faith that often goes unnoticed by human eyes. These miracles unequivocally unveiled Jesus, his identity, his overarching mission, and the very essence of his heart. Simultaneously, they reveal us, too, for our response to these divine interventions speaks volumes about whether we are genuinely seeking God himself or simply temporary relief. Indeed, the most profoundly dangerous miracles were precisely those that laid bare an authority no mere human being was ever meant to possess. News reached Jesus that Lazarus, whom he deeply cherished, had fallen gravely ill. His sisters, Mary and Martha, had dispatched an urgent plea, "Lord, the one you love is ill." Yet, remarkably, Jesus remained exactly where he was for 2 additional days. He exhibited no haste, no trace of panic. He waited deliberately until Lazarus had been dead for a full 4 days, a duration sufficient to dispel any doubt about his passing. Consequently, when Jesus finally arrived in Bethany, Martha encountered him on the road, her words heavy with inconsolable grief and profound confusion. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Martha held a firm belief in Jesus. She trusted in his power to heal. However, she also harbored the conviction that his arrival was now irrevocably too late. When Jesus assured her that Lazarus would rise again, Martha simply nodded, likely envisioning the general resurrection at the culmination of time, a distant, future event, safely categorized within theological hope when the stark present offered no solace. Then, Jesus uttered words that fundamentally reoriented everything. "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live." He didn't say, "I will bring resurrection," nor "I believe in resurrection." He unequivocally declared, "I am the resurrection." Resurrection was not merely a future event. It was a living, breathing person standing directly before her. Jesus then proceeded to the tomb. There, in a profoundly human display of empathy, he wept, fully experiencing the depths of grief. Yet, moments later, with a commanding, resonant voice, he cried out, "Lazarus, come out." And the man who had been dead for 4 days, still bound in his burial cloths, obediently walked forth from the tomb. This particular miracle holds a singular significance, setting it apart from all others. It represented a direct, unequivocal confrontation with the ultimate adversary that every human being inevitably faces, death itself. Death had claimed Lazarus utterly and completely. There was absolutely no room for ambiguity, no possibility of misdiagnosis, no remote chance that he had merely been unconscious. For days entombed in the sweltering heat of the Middle East unequivocally removed all doubt regarding his demise. And yet, Jesus, with a single, authoritative word, entirely reversed it. But what truly elevates this miracle to pivotal status is its profound revelation of Jesus' inherent authority. While raw power can certainly be impressive, true authority is an entirely distinct phenomenon. Authority does not seek permission, nor does it engage in negotiation. Rather, it commands, and reality itself submits. The religious leaders, astute observers of power dynamics, instantly grasped this crucial distinction. Following Lazarus's emergence from the tomb, the chief priests and Pharisees immediately convened a council. They did not, indeed, they could not, deny the miracle. Instead, their chilling conclusion was, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And so, driven by fear of losing control, they definitively resolved that Jesus must die. Thus, the very miracle that irrefutably demonstrated Jesus' ultimate authority over death became the catalyst that initiated his own path toward execution. Lazarus was called forth from the grave, and in that same moment, Jesus began his inexorable journey toward the cross. Such is the profound, often costly, nature of divine revelation. Jesus was not late in human terms. He arrived precisely when death had exhausted every single one of its arguments, when all human hope had utterly bled out, and when no rational human explanation remained. He arrived at the very instant when only God, and God alone, could possibly act. This man had been blind from birth, his world entirely devoid of color, light, or the visual memory of a single face. His entire existence had been perpetually shaped by impenetrable darkness and the ephemeral echoes of passing voices. The disciples, upon seeing him, instinctively transformed his suffering into an immediate theological dilemma, questioning, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" They sought a clear explanation, a logical reason, someone to assign blame. Jesus, however, offered them neither. Jesus directly countered their assumptions. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. Rather, this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Following this, Jesus performed an unusual act. He spat on the ground, mixed the saliva with earth to form mud, and gently spread it upon the man's sightless eyes. He then instructed him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. The man obeyed, washed, and for the very first time in his life, he beheld the world with sight. One might logically assume this would be the joyful conclusion: a blind man restored to sight, followed by widespread celebration and communal marveling at God's goodness. But that is not at all what transpired. Instead, the Pharisees launched into a relentless interrogation, demanding to know precisely how he had been healed, by whom, and crucially, whether this healer was truly from God or merely a sinner. The man, with straightforward honesty and no pretense, replied, "I don't know if he's a sinner. One thing I do know, I was blind and now I see." Their concern, however, was not for his newfound sight, but solely for the perceived threat to their own authority. When the man steadfastly refused to condemn Jesus, the Pharisees escalated their tactics. They summoned his parents, attempting to ensnare them into admitting anything that might discredit the miracle. His parents, paralyzed by the fear of excommunication from the synagogue, cautiously distanced themselves, stating, "He's of age, ask him." Consequently, the Pharisees turned their focus back to the now-seeing man and, in an act of punitive dismissal, cast him out from their assembly. He had gained his sight, but in doing so, he tragically lost his entire community. After the man had been unjustly excommunicated, Jesus actively sought him out. He found him and posed a profound question: "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man, still seeking understanding, responded, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus then revealed, "You have seen him, and he is the one speaking to you." Overwhelmed, the man immediately worshipped him. He had been physically healed by Jesus, but now he encountered him personally. The miracle had opened his physical eyes, yet this profound encounter granted him something infinitely greater: a newfound identity, a sense of true belonging, and a clear purpose. Revelation frequently comes at a significant cost. It inevitably disrupts established norms, uncomfortably exposes hidden truths, and compels individuals to choose between deeply ingrained familiarity and an undeniable reality. The man born blind, in embracing this revelation, forfeited every aspect of his familiar existence. Yet, in that profound loss, he discovered the single most important thing. It prompts a challenging question for us. Would you still pursue truth, even if it meant sacrificing your place, your status, your community? For 12 long years, this woman had endured a continuous hemorrhage. 12 years marked by absolute isolation, by being ceremonially unclean, and by squandering all her resources on physicians who offered no genuine relief. The Gospel of Mark starkly recounts her immense suffering under numerous doctors, and how, instead of improving, her condition steadily worsened. She existed as an invisible, untouchable figure, severed from community, from worship, and from the fundamental rhythms of life that others effortlessly took for granted. Then, a faint whisper of hope reached her. Jesus was passing through. A dense crowd thronged around Jesus, who was currently en route to heal Jairus' daughter, the child of a prominent synagogue leader, a figure of undeniable importance whose need was publicly recognized. This woman, however, possessed no invitation, no prearranged appointment, no influential intermediary to advocate on her behalf. She held but a single, desperate thought. If I can just touch his garment, I will be made well. With this conviction, she bravely pushed through the surging multitude, extended her hand, and brushed against the fringe of his cloak. Instantly, she felt in her body the undeniable sensation of healing. And just as immediately, Jesus halted. He turned, asking his disciples, "Who touched me?" The disciples, bewildered by the jostling throng, were confused, for everyone was pressing in on him from all sides. Yet, Jesus profoundly understood that something distinctly different had occurred. Power, a tangible force, had emanated from him, not forcefully taken, but freely and fully given in response to a faith that did not loudly proclaim itself, but simply reached out. The woman, trembling with emotion, stepped forward and fell before him. She confessed her entire truth, her chronic condition, her profound desperation, and the fragile hope that had propelled her to this pivotal moment. And Jesus, with a tenderness that utterly reframed her reality, spoke to her. "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." He publicly addressed her as daughter before the entire crowd. For 12 years, she had been utterly invisible. Now, she was seen. She had been ritually unclean. Now, she was welcomed. She had lived nameless, but now she was called by the most intimate term of belonging that Jesus could possibly bestow. This moment was a profound restoration of her long-lost dignity. True faith does not demand loudness or eloquence. It requires neither a grand platform nor an esteemed pedigree. Faith is, at its core, trust directed toward the right object. And when that trust reaches out to Jesus, even in the depths of desperation, even in profound silence, even when no other human being observes, heaven unfailingly responds. This woman had no elaborate words, only the sheer strength to reach out. And that, unequivocally, was sufficient. Jesus not only healed her body but deliberately paused everything to honor her quiet faith, to declare her inherent value aloud, and to send her forth in profound peace. Faith may not always announce itself with fanfare, but heaven recognizes it every single time. Jairus, a respected synagogue leader, a man of considerable standing and influence, approached Jesus in utter desperation, falling at his feet and imploring him to come to his house. His daughter, his only daughter, a tender girl of 12, was gravely ill and swiftly fading. Jesus assented and began to walk toward Jairus' home. It was then that he paused. The bleeding woman had reached out and touched his cloak, and Jesus deliberately turned to acknowledge her, to restore her, and to publicly affirm her dignity before the assembled crowd. This pause was brief, perhaps only a few minutes, but for Jairus, standing there and watching, every single second must have stretched into an unbearable eternity. His beloved daughter lay dying, and Jesus had seemingly stopped simply to talk. Then, the crushing message arrived. Messengers from Jairus' household approached with words that struck like a final verdict. "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" It was undeniably over. Too late. Whatever fragile hope Jairus had desperately clung to as he rushed to find Jesus, whatever shred of belief had compelled him to his knees in public, all of it utterly disintegrated in that devastating moment. But Jesus, hearing the grim report, immediately turned to Jairus and commanded, "Do not fear, only believe." They continued their journey to the house. By the time they arrived, professional mourners were already present, weeping and wailing loudly. A public, undeniable, and utterly final declaration of death. Jesus surveyed the scene and uttered words that must have sounded utterly absurd to those gathered. "Why are you making such a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." Their immediate response was derisive laughter. He then gently but firmly put all the skeptical onlookers outside. Taking only the child's father and mother, along with Peter, James, and John, he entered the room where the young girl lay. He took her small hand in his and softly commanded, "Talitha koum," which, translated, means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately, to the astonishment of those present, she sat up and began to walk. There was no theatrical drama, no grand performance, just quiet, sovereign authority effortlessly speaking life into the very face of death. Jairus had feared Jesus was too late. The messengers had been absolutely certain of it. The mourners had publicly confirmed it. Yet, what appeared as an agonizing delay from a human perspective was, in fact, divine precision from the throne of God. Jesus resurrected a dead girl, and the specific timing of this miracle is crucial. Had he arrived earlier, some might have claimed she was never truly gone. Had he rushed, the act might have been attributed to urgency rather than intrinsic authority. Instead, he arrived only after her death had been unequivocally declared, after all hope had been formally interred, and then he simply spoke. What often feels like delay to us is frequently precision to God. He operates not according to our frantic panic, but steadfastly according to his eternal purpose. It was the darkest hour, the fourth watch of the night, between 3 and 6 in the morning. The disciples, alone in their boat, were desperately straining against a relentless headwind, making virtually no progress. Waves relentlessly battered their small vessel from every direction, leaving them utterly exhausted, frustrated, and profoundly frightened. Jesus had sent them ahead after the miraculous feeding of the 5,000, while he ascended a mountain to pray. Now, stranded on the tumultuous sea, struggling in the oppressive darkness, they suddenly witnessed him, walking on the water, moving toward them across the churning surface as if it were solid ground. Their initial reaction was not faith, but unadulterated terror. They believed he was a ghost and cried out in stark fear. But Jesus immediately spoke, his voice cutting through the storm. "Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid." Peter, ever impulsive, called back across the water, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus responded with a single, potent word, "Come." Peter, with audacious faith, stepped out of the boat and indeed began to walk on water. For a few incredible moments, he accomplished the impossible, his gaze steadfastly fixed on Jesus. But then, his attention faltered. He noticed the formidable wind. He saw the towering waves. He felt the surrounding chaos, and fear swiftly usurped his focus. He began to sink, crying out desperately, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus extended his hand and caught him, gently admonishing, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" As they re-entered the boat together, the wind instantly ceased. The disciples, overcome with awe, worshipped him, proclaiming, "Truly, you are the Son of God." This particular miracle unveils an essential truth about Jesus' mode of operation. He approached them directly through the heart of the chaos, in the dead of night, while they were exhausted and paralyzed by fear. And, crucially, he then extended an invitation for Peter to step into that very same chaos. This is a pattern we frequently overlook. We often presume that Jesus will eliminate all difficulties before asking us to exercise faith. We expect the waters to be perfectly calm before we dare to walk upon them. Yet, Peter walked on raging water. The tumultuous waves did not subside until both he and Jesus were safely back in the boat. Jesus actively enters into chaos. He traverses it, and at times, he calls us to step out into it alongside him. Not because the chaos itself is safe, but because he is. Peter's faith did not waver due to the storm's overwhelming strength. It failed when he diverted his focus from Jesus to the surrounding circumstances. And even in that moment of despairing descent, Jesus was intimately close enough to immediately catch him. Authority over chaos does not equate to the absence of chaos. It signifies the steadfast presence of the one who unequivocally commands it. The vast multitude had spent the entire day with Jesus, following him to a remote, desolate location, captivated by his teachings and the numerous healings they had witnessed. Now, as evening approached, they were profoundly hungry, over 5,000 people with absolutely nothing to eat. The disciples approached Jesus with a pragmatic solution: send the crowds away so they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves. Jesus, however, responded with an utterly unexpected command: "You give them something to eat." The disciples were completely baffled. Philip, quickly calculating, noted that even 200 denarii worth of bread would be insufficient for each person to receive even a small portion. Andrew then offered a seemingly insignificant piece of information: "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish." But what are they for so many? 5 small loaves, 2 modest fish, scarcely enough to feed one individual, let alone a vast multitude. Jesus did not dispute their assessment, nor did he offer any explanation as to how this feat would be accomplished. He simply instructed them to have the people sit down in groups. Then, he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up to heaven, offered thanks, and began to break them. He handed the pieces to the disciples, who, in turn, distributed them to the immense crowd. And everyone ate, not merely a taste, not just enough to survive, but they ate until they were completely satisfied. When the meal concluded, the disciples collected the remaining fragments, filling 12 baskets to the brim, far more than they had begun with. What makes this miracle particularly instructive is Jesus' deliberate involvement of his disciples. He possessed the power to feed the crowd directly, without their participation. Instead, he strategically placed them in the role of distributing what he miraculously provided. They handed out bread that, by all rational standards, should have been utterly insufficient, and yet they witnessed it multiply miraculously within their very hands. The young boy simply offered what he possessed, a meager offering that seemed utterly insignificant. But once released into the hands of Jesus, it transformed into an overflowing abundance for thousands. This illustrates a fundamental rhythm of God's divine provision. He multiplies what we willingly release, not what we hoard. He calls us to bring whatever little we have, however small it may appear, and to trust him implicitly with the ultimate outcome. While the disciples perceived stark scarcity, Jesus recognized an opportune moment to unveil the boundless generosity of the Father. True provision, we learn, commences with an act of surrender. And when we entrust our meager offerings into the hands of Jesus, we invariably discover that his divine mathematics operate on an entirely different, miraculous paradigm than our own. The house in Capernaum where Jesus was teaching was utterly packed, the crowd so immense that there was literally no room left, not even extending beyond the door. People pressed in from every conceivable side, each eager to hear him speak. Amidst this throng, 4 determined men arrived, carrying their paralyzed friend on a mat. Their singular purpose was to bring him to Jesus for healing. However, upon reaching the house, they found entry utterly impossible. The crowd was impenetrable. Undeterred, they ascended to the roof, painstakingly dug through the structure, and then carefully lowered their friend down on ropes, placing him directly before Jesus. Jesus, witnessing this extraordinary effort, perceived their collective faith, not merely the paralyzed man's belief, but the resolute faith of his dedicated friends who refused to allow any obstacle to deter them, literally demolishing a roof to bring their companion to the only one capable of providing help. And then, Jesus uttered words that caught everyone by surprise. "Son, your sins are forgiven," he declared. Not "be healed," nor "rise and walk." He pronounced the forgiveness of the man's sins. The scribes, observing this from their seated positions, immediately began reasoning in their hearts, though unspoken. Why does this man speak like that? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Jesus, discerning their silent thoughts, turned to them and directly challenged, "Why do you question these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Rise, take up your bed and walk'?" It was a truly brilliant, incisive question. Both declarations are inherently impossible for any mere human to accomplish. Uttering either without the inherent power to fulfill it would be utterly meaningless. Yet, forgiveness, by its nature, is invisible, while physical healing is visibly verifiable. Jesus continued, "But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." Then he turned to the paralytic and commanded, "I say to you, rise, pick up your bed, and go home." And immediately the man stood up, took his mat, and walked out before the astonished eyes of everyone present. The crowd was utterly amazed, glorifying God and exclaiming, "We have never seen anything like this." The scribes, however, were far from celebrating. Jesus had just unequivocally claimed divine authority in the most public manner imaginable. The forgiveness of sins belonged solely to God, and Jesus had just asserted that authority as his own. The healing merely amazed the crowd. The declaration of forgiveness profoundly exposed the hidden intentions of their hearts. The paralytic man departed from that house with far more than simply restored legs. He walked out forgiven, declared spiritually clean before God, released from an internal burden that no earthly physician could ever hope to touch. This instance powerfully demonstrates that authority over sin inherently precedes authority over sickness. By choosing to heal the deeper, spiritual wound first, Jesus unequivocally revealed that his mission was never solely about physically repairing bodies. It was ultimately about profoundly restoring souls. Jesus crossed the turbulent Sea of Galilee and disembarked in the wild, desolate region of the Gerasenes. No sooner had he stepped ashore than a man came hurtling toward him from among the tombs. This man, an outcast, lived perpetually among the dead. He was naked, violently uncontrollable, and relentlessly tormented. The desperate townspeople had repeatedly attempted to restrain him with chains and shackles, but he had, with supernatural strength, shattered every bond. No human effort could subdue him. Day and night, he roamed wildly among the graves and across the mountains, ceaselessly crying out and savagely cutting himself with stones. He was utterly isolated, dangerously unpredictable, and possessed by an infestation of demons so vast and numerous that they collectively identified themselves as Legion. Despite his tormented state, when the man saw Jesus from a distance, he immediately ran to him and fell prostrate. Yet, it was not the man himself who spoke, but the multitude of demons within him, crying out in terror, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." Jesus had already issued his command for the unclean spirit to depart. The demons, recognizing his undeniable identity and absolute authority, desperately pleaded with him not to banish them from that region. Nearby, a large herd of approximately 2,000 pigs was feeding on the hillside. The demons then implored Jesus, "Send us to the pigs. Let us enter them." Jesus granted them permission. The unclean spirits instantly departed from the man, entered the pigs, and the entire herd, in a frenzied stampede, rushed headlong down the steep bank into the sea and drowned. The terrified herdsmen fled in panic, spreading word of these astonishing events throughout the city and surrounding countryside. Word spread quickly, and the curious crowds ventured out to witness the aftermath firsthand. Upon their arrival, they discovered the formerly tormented man, now miraculously sane, sitting calmly, fully clothed, and completely in his right mind. The wild, uncontrollable individual who had once terrorized the entire region was now utterly calm, fully restored, and truly free. But instead of celebration, a chilling fear gripped the onlookers. Their dread was no longer directed at the demons. It was aimed squarely at Jesus himself. Confronted by the undeniable evidence of his power, they pleaded with him to depart from their territory. This profound liberation had come at a tangible cost. 2,000 pigs lay drowned, and their local economy was thrown into disarray. More unsettling still was the raw, untamed power that had accomplished this miracle, a power too unpredictable, too formidable, and ultimately, too far beyond their control. The man who had experienced this incredible deliverance, however, yearned to follow Jesus. But Jesus gave him a different directive. "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So, the man, now an evangelist for his own story, went throughout the Decapolis, proclaiming all that Jesus had done for him. And indeed, everyone who heard marveled at the transformation. In this striking encounter, one individual found complete liberation from torment and profound isolation. Yet, an entire community, faced with such a powerful revelation, ultimately chose their comfort and convenience over divine truth. This narrative starkly illustrates a difficult truth. Freedom can indeed be inconvenient. Deliverance, though miraculous, often brings disruption. And sometimes, the most awe-inspiring miracle is the very one people, in their fear or short-sightedness, implore to depart. Following these events, Jesus led Peter, James, and John high up a solitary mountain. It was an intimate gathering, just the four of them. No curious crowds, no public spectacle, no prior announcement. And there, amidst the quiet majesty of the peak, an extraordinary event unfolded, something that transcended the typical definition of a miracle. Jesus performed no healing, cast out no demons, multiplied no food, nor did he calm any storm. Instead, he was utterly transfigured before their eyes. His face radiated with a brilliant glow, shining like the noonday sun, while his garments became dazzlingly white, a luminescence brighter than any earthly bleach could achieve. Suddenly, and inexplicably, Moses, the great lawgiver, and Elijah, the revered prophet, appeared alongside him. They were deep in conversation with Jesus, speaking of his impending departure, a profound term for his coming death and resurrection, which he was soon to accomplish in Jerusalem. Peter, utterly overwhelmed by the celestial vision and struggling to comprehend what he was witnessing, impulsively blurted out, "Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He was still speaking when a radiant cloud descended and overshadowed them, and from within the cloud, a powerful voice resonated, declaring, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." The disciples, consumed by terror at the divine pronouncement, fell prostrate on their faces. Jesus then approached them, gently touching them as he said, "Rise and have no fear." When they dared to look up, Moses and Elijah had vanished. Only Jesus remained, standing before them. This unique moment on the mountain stands profoundly apart from every other miracle Jesus performed throughout his ministry. Here, nothing was broken and then repaired. No state was altered from one condition to another. Instead, it was as if a veil was suddenly drawn back. For a brief, breathtaking instant, the inherent, eternal glory that Jesus had always possessed was unveiled. He didn't become glorious on that mountain. He is glorious. The transfiguration was not an act of transformation, but an act of pure revelation. Peter, James, and John were granted a glimpse of Jesus as he truly is, in his divine essence. They witnessed him conversing with Moses, the foundational lawgiver, and Elijah, the climactic prophet, seeing the seamless continuity of God's overarching plan, the profound fulfillment of everything the law and the prophets had foretold and pointed toward. And then, they heard the authoritative voice of the Father himself, undeniably affirming Jesus' true identity, echoing what Jesus had been declaring all along. "This is my Son. Listen to him." While the miracles Jesus performed throughout his earthly ministry showcased his undeniable authority over sickness, death, nature, and the forces of darkness, the Transfiguration revealed something infinitely deeper. It laid bare his very identity as the eternal Son of God, truly God clothed in human flesh, carrying a celestial glory that the finite world could never fully contain. Jesus didn't need to prove who he was. He needed to reveal it. And for those 3 disciples on that mountain, this profound revelation indeed changed everything. By now, a significant pattern should be clear. These miracles were far from random displays of power. Instead, they built upon one another, each successive act deepening the understanding of Jesus' true identity. Each miracle peeled back another layer, disclosing more about who Jesus actually was. He spoke to the dead, and they returned to life. He restored sight to the blind, often at great personal cost to those involved. He consistently honored hidden faith, confronted paralyzing fear, miraculously fed thousands, authoritatively forgave sins, walked with ease through raging storms, and liberated people from spiritual darkness that no one else could ever touch. And then, culminating on a mountain, he permitted 3 chosen men to witness the divine glory he had been carrying within himself all along. Each miracle, in its astonishing display, implicitly posed a profound question to all who witnessed it. Who possesses the power to raise the dead? Who truly decides what is ritually clean or unclean? Who holds the ultimate authority to forgive sins? Who commands the very winds and waves? Who alone can shatter chains that earthly power cannot break? And every single answer, without exception, pointed inexorably in the same, singular direction. Confronted with such undeniable evidence, people who encountered these events were compelled to make a decision. Some chose to believe and embrace him, others stubbornly resisted, some committed to following, while others ultimately turned away. Yet, one thing was certain: nobody remained neutral for long. And that fundamental truth, even today, remains unchanged. These ancient miracles continue to confront us in the present day. They push us beyond the self-serving question of "what can Jesus do for me?" toward the far more profound inquiry: who is he really? This challenging question persists, even when the answer profoundly disrupts what we might have expected or wanted. True faith often manifests precisely when explanations are exhausted, and we continue to trust despite the lack of certainty. So, this brings us to a crucial point. When Jesus reveals himself to us, how do we respond? Do we commit to following him only when we clearly see his provision, or do we dare to trust him even into the heart of uncertainty? Do we simply admire his immense power from a safe distance, or do we genuinely listen to his words and heed his call? These miracles were never intended to elicit mere applause. They demand allegiance, a total commitment. And that profound invitation remains open to us today, because the nature of Jesus himself has not changed. Yet, miracles were not the only method Jesus employed to communicate profound truths. When he wished to illustrate the inner workings of his kingdom, defining who belongs, who stands outside, what the true cost of discipleship entails, and why some grasp its message while others remain oblivious, he masterfully told stories. These were parables, deceptively simple narratives, accessible enough for a child to comprehend, yet sharp enough to pierce through every intellectual defense an adult might erect. While the miracles undeniably showcased his divine power, the parables unveil the very way he thinks, revealing the wisdom and heart of God. And that, then, is where our journey takes us next, an exploration of the 10 most powerful parables of Jesus. Because truly knowing who he is, that is merely the beginning. Learning how he's calling you to live in response to that knowledge, that changes absolutely everything.